Hi, welcome to my Introduction to ArcCatalog lecture. This lecture really has two parts. One, to introduce you to ArcCatalog, and two, to talk to you about data organization and efficiency. So two parts, sort of two topics, all rolled into one lecture. My name is Stuart Bruce. I'm GIS Program Coordinator at Washington College, and this is part of our online professional development courses at our geoworkshops.org site, and I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Now, the purpose of ArcCatalog is really to be the data manager for the ArcGIS product line. It's really where you're going to view, create, manage, and organize your data. It also has the ability to update metadata, which is very important because you want to know all about your data, who made it, where it came from, things like that. And it's really a one-stop location to do a lot of functions related with geospatial data. Very important application, and it's important that you understand it. Now, ArcCatalog is an excellent way to organize your data and to move data around from one location to the other. In terms of spatial data, it can handle shapefiles, geodatabases, coverages, raster data. It can also handle things like text files, map documents, just really anything related to GIS that you're going to want to use or manage. Now, this slide may be a little bit hard to see, but ArcCatalog is in some ways familiar. It's familiar or similar to Windows Explorer. The problem is that Windows Explorer really shows you all the data, okay? For example, a shapefile might have several different files that make up a shapefile, and when you look at it in Windows Explorer, you'll see every one of those files. If you try to move stuff around in Windows Explorer, you got to make sure that you copy every single one of those files that makes up a shapefile. ArcCatalog, on the other hand, when you're looking at a shapefile, it just shows you one icon for the shapefile. And when you move it around in ArcCatalog is smart enough to make sure it moves all the actual files that go into making up a shapefile. So this is a very important consideration, and you might want to try this yourself on your own data and look at the difference in how data looks in Windows Explorer and in the same folder on your computer, how it looks in ArcCatalog. I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and maybe I can show you some better examples. The first file format we're going to talk about is shapefiles, and I'm going to go ahead and expand this dialog here. Now, unfortunately, that maybe didn't help too much with the clarity of this, but what it's trying to show you here, this is a Pennsylvania Streams file, and in ArcCatalog, we just see a single file indicating the shapefile, but in Windows Explorer, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 separate files to make up that shapefile. File geodatabases. This is a new format, came out in ArcGIS 9. It's really the preferred geodatabase format for you to use. In ArcCatalog, you can easily see what the features are inside that geodatabase. Now, I don't have a slide to show you here. I'll try to make sure I include that in my ArcCatalog demo. But if you open up a file geodatabase inside Windows Explorer and you look inside that folder, you're going to have absolutely no idea whatsoever what geospatial features are stored inside that file geodatabase. Only with ArcCatalog can you crack the drum and see what's inside that container. Personal geodatabases. Here, again, it's kind of the same principle. Of course, a personal geodatabase is a Microsoft Access database format. Technically, you can use Microsoft Access and peer inside a personal geodatabase and start to figure it out, but that's a lot of extra work, and there's no reason for you to want to do that when you can use ArcCatalog. coverages. Uh, Coverages are really the old Arcinfo data format. They're not being used very much anymore, but as you prowl around the internet looking for data sources, you're quite likely to run across old Arcinfo files. Arcinfo really has a two folder structure where it has one folder that typically has the data layer name, and there's another folder called info that contains information related to that coverage. Again, ArcCatalog displays it very simply for you to use. You don't see those two folders, and if you copy or move an ArcInfo coverage from one location to another inside ArcCatalog, it will cleanly transfer that data. It's not really possible in Windows Explorer to move a coverage around correctly. Raster data, I'm going to go ahead and try to expand this a little bit here. Again, it's a little fuzzy, and I apologize for that. But the same principle applies for raster data. Raster data can have multiple files. So you might have the image file, you might have some additional data in regards to projections or other related information for the raster. And if you wanted to copy to Windows Explorer, you'd have to make sure that you copy all of the files that make up the raster. Whereas in ArcCatalog, it simply shows a single file. It tells you that it's a raster data set, and there's really no issues with moving stuff around. So what's the takeaway lesson here? It can be very dangerous to move geospatial data files without using the ArcCatalog user interface. It was designed for that purpose, and you should use it, and you will be thankful that you did. All right, now I'm going to talk about the ArcCatalog interface and give you a little bit of a tour. I'm just going to navigate through here kind of quickly. We have the catalog tree, which is located on the far left-hand side. This is where you can see your folder structure, and you can see the different types of data sets. We have an option to open up Arc Toolbox inside the ArcCatalog interface. We have a display window, and in the display window you can see the contents of a location. You can preview what the geospatial data looks like, and you can also look at the metadata for that file. There's a variety of pull-down menus that we're going to discuss, and there's a number of toolbars that you can use. For example, the geographic toolbar. This is really a special one. Most of the time it's grayed out, but when you're in the preview display, it activates, and you can actually navigate and zoom in and sort of query your data inside ArcCatalog, which is a pretty nifty feature. Now, just like in ArcMap, there are pull-down menus, and we're going to talk about some of those. Basically, the most important option in the File pull-down menu is the New option. This is where you're going to create new data. So for example, we're showing you here, you could create things like a new folder to hold data. You can create different kinds of geodatabases. You could create a shapefile. You could start a new table. You could create an address locator, etc. Most of the things I create these days using ArcCatalog is I always start off making a file geodatabase because that's really the preferred data format for ArcGIS. There's some other toolbars that you can use, the standard geography, location, and style toolbars. And like I've demonstrated before, you can move and dock these toolbars just like you could inside ArcMap. Okay, the standard toolbar. I do want to point out here that you can go back to my lecture notes and you can review these carefully. Basically, this is a whirlwind tour, and I don't necessarily want to talk all day about this, but the up one level toolbar is very important because it allows you to navigate up the directory structure. You can connect to a folder. So let's say, for example, when you first turn on ArcCatalog, it only recognizes that you have a C drive. because all computers have a C drive. It may not recognize that you have a DVD drive or you plug in a portable hard drive, and you'll have to use the Connect to Folder button so that ArcCatalog recognizes that you have an additional folder. Well, now that I have that little phone call out of the way, I will continue with my lecture. Of course, if you can connect to a folder, you're going to be able to disconnect to a folder or disconnect from a folder. Copy, paste, delete tools, pretty normal. Okay, well this time I'm going to put my phone on vibrate so it doesn't ring like that again. Now, very important. You see we have a big warning sign, caution, danger. In ArcCatalog, if you use the delete tool, it is gone forever. No undo, no go back. So be very careful using the delete tool in ArcCatalog. This next thing here is basically a variety of tools. You can go with large icon look, for example. You could also pick the look like this as sort of a kind of a detailed view. Notice that it tells you what the data name is. It gives you a little symbol. So if you have point files, it looks like little points. Polygons look like little polygons. Lines look like lines. And if you can't figure out that symbology, it actually says, it actually also tells you whether it's a shapefile or Geodatabase or things like that. And you'll see this when you do the exercise a little bit better. This is a more sort of detailed view. This actually tells you the size of the file and what the modification date was, which can be very useful sometimes. If you're looking for something that you knew was modified just very recently, you could just sort by the modified date, and that data will rise to the top in ArcCatalog. This last one here is kind of an odd view. It's called the thumbnail view. I don't use it very much myself. Unfortunately, with ArcCatalog, if you want thumbnails, you have to make them yourself, which can be rather tedious. There may be a button that automatically makes thumbnails in ArcGIS 10, but if there is, I haven't found it yet. So I won't exclude that because that would be one really cool button to have. The search tool, if you're in a folder location that has tons and tons of data, being able to search for stuff is quite useful. Some of these other buttons here, actually within ArcCatalog, you can launch ArcMap, you can launch ArcToolbox, you can go into command line, you can turn on the model builder, and it has the same what's this button as we had in ArcMap, and it probably doesn't work on Windows 7 64-bit workstation either. The geography toolbar, we're going to come back and look at that a little bit later, and I briefly mentioned why it's grayed out. Basically, it remains grayed out unless you're in the preview view. Location toolbar, kind of handy at times when you're looking at data. It basically just tells you where that data is. Metadata toolbar deals with metadata, and basically, unless you're in the metadata view, it will remain grayed out. We will discuss this a little bit later in the lecture when we talk about metadata. Now, there are other toolbars. If you go to the Customize menu, you can turn on these different toolbars. You can also just right-click within any gray space in ArcCatalog interface, and you'll see a drop-down list that basically allows you to pick toolbars. There's not as many toolbars in ArcCatalog as there is, for example, in ArcMap. Now, conversion tools. One of the very useful tools, if you have different file formats, you want to go to the conversion tools, and then you can convert other data formats to formats that ArcGIS would prefer you work with. Catalog tree, going into some details there. This is where you're going to view all your data. You can expand these folders and see what's inside and go into a little bit of exploration. There are some other services here like database servers and database connections and GIS servers. We're not going to go into a lot of details on those at this point. since this is in a rather introductory course. This example here is showing you what happens if you click the plus sign next to a data folder. It expands and you can see what's inside. Now, some of the toolbars here, we're going to fly through these. Of course, the standard toolbar, I've talked about many of those tools already. Geography toolbar, again, to tell you the truth, this slide seems a little repetitive since I already discussed these. So we're just going to blast through this. Contents window, very important. This is one of the 3 windows that you can use inside ArcCatalog. It looks a lot like what's in the catalog tree. Okay, so you can see the catalog tree, and then you look at this data and you go, what's the difference? Basically, you can adjust how the contents tab looks using some of those tabs I showed you, like large icons, detailed view, thumbnail view. And that's really sort of the difference between the two, or a primary difference between the two. Contents options, you can play around with what you see. So if you open up the options, by going to ArcCatalog options, you select the contents tab, you can change what's shown. You're always going to see the name and the type, but if you want to see the size and whether it was modified, the location, you have to open up these options and you have to select those and turn them on. They're not automatically turned on. I think size of the file and the modified date are important things that I want to see inside my ArcCatalog interface. The preview window, very powerful, very handy. It allows you to do things like preview a folder. Now, if you click on a folder and not an individual data set, when you go to preview, you're not going to see anything because you can't preview multiple data layers at the same time. You want to preview a feature class. In this case, we've selected PA County over in our catalog tree, and then boom, we can see what this file looks like. The geography toolbar at this point becomes important. When you're in the preview tab, the geography toolbar opens up, and then you can use these navigational tools to zoom into your data in ArcCatalog. You can pan around, and, which I find very useful, you can use the identify button and actually look at the attribute information associated with the spatial features. You can create a thumbnail. That's the very last tool on the geography toolbar. This create thumbnail tool basically allows you to, create a thumbnail. So you can see what it looks like before, and you can see what it looks like after. Now, if you have thumbnails, then if you use the thumbnail view for your contents window, you'll be able to really quickly peruse the data and see what's going on. At the bottom of the preview window, there's a drop-down menu. If you look here, you can see in the bottom here, you can preview the spatial data, and you can also preview the attribute information, which I find very, very handy. And this brings up an important point. The biggest benefit of ArcCatalog is the preview. So if you're not 100% sure if you have data and you want to add it to ArcMap, what you don't really want to do is add data to ArcMap, then look at it and decide you don't want it and then have to delete it. ArcCatalog allows you to sort of surf your data, look at the spatial features, look at the attributes, and determine whether or not that's the data you want to have for your project. So it's really a time saver for you. Big, big benefit. Now I'm going to talk about metadata. So metadata is data about data. Okay, it's very important. I did put in here the don't duck metadata. For those of you that maybe have been around for a while, you may not be watching this lecture. The Federal Geographic Data Committee used to give out grants, and actually I think they still do, to help people make metadata. And they used to have these little ducks they would hand out. Don't duck metadata. I got about 7 or 8 of them that I throw in my pool in the summertime. So when you click the description tab in ArcGIS 10. It will show you if there's any metadata available for that. If there's not, it'll just come up and give you a lot of sort of no data or nothing to report. You do have the option to create metadata. This validate metadata tool I don't use very often right now, but it could take your metadata and convert it into an XML file format. Metadata properties is the one that you're going to use most often, because this is what allows you to edit and basically create metadata if there's no metadata available when you get the data in the first place. So the description tab, select edit, and you should be able to put some basic information here. You will have an opportunity to do this in the exercise, so we'll let you learn more about how to do that during the exercise. Of course, FGDC mentioned grants. Here we have plans for the 2012 NSDI CAP. I used to like to tell my former bosses at Mifflin County that I just got another USGS FGDC NSDI CAP grant. And they would just look at me oddly and say, "That's wonderful." Now, I'm going to talk about GIS data organization. All right, I'm going to talk about a couple different things that I think are important to GIS data organization. So what are some of the factors that keep you from getting organized? One of them is definitely, do you have enough time? So you get very busy, I understand that, but you really have to make it happen. So set a date, set a time, or try to schedule in some time in your regular activities to try to stay organized. Whether you do this maybe first thing when you come in the morning while you're sipping your coffee, or right after lunch or something like that. If you don't sort of set some time aside, then you're never going to get organized. Do you have a plan to organize? Now, if money was no object, you could hire a planning consultant, someone like, hey, who knows, you could hire me, and I could come in and do an expert organizational plan for you to follow. But if you don't have the money, you can still organize, okay? Some of the things that we do, we like to organize files by project name. Sometimes we put the date in. We organize by types of data. A number of different things that we've done that works for my team to keep everything together and organized. But it does take a little bit of time. If you scatter your data all over the place, let's say, for example, you have GIS data on your desktop, you have GIS data in your My Documents or your user folder, you have GIS data on the server, you have GIS data everywhere. Then when you get into a crisis situation, you need to find that data, you're really not sure where to look. Maybe you put it on a jump drive. Now, did I leave it on the jump drive? Was that the red jump drive, or was that the blue jump drive, or just where the heck is that data? You're going to end up wasting more time looking for data than you would have spent to organize the data in the first place. Another problem with ArcGIS in particular is a lot of times when you do ArcGIS processes, it selects a file name for you that just really simply makes absolutely no sense and tells you nothing about the data. So you have to take a little bit of extra time and give that a file name that you're going to remember what the heck that data is in a few weeks or a few months, or who knows, in a year or two when you look at the file name. A file name like export output 12 doesn't tell you squat about the data. Do you create metadata for the files that you make? Well, if you don't, a little bit of time goes by and you have no idea where this came from, who made it, why it was made, or anything about the data at all. Let's say you're lucky enough to have a student intern work for you. That student could do a lot of productive work all summer, for example, but at the end of the summer, if you didn't tell that student to make metadata and you go back a few months later and try to see what that student did, you may not be able to figure it out, and then effectively you've wasted all that labor that was meant to increase your organizational GIS data. Now, what are some of the benefits of organization? Well, number one, you can find the files when you need them. That's probably the biggest thing. Stop having to wonder where you put data. You have an organizational scheme. You can pull data up instantly, and this is going to save time and increase your productivity. If you have metadata, you can answer the 5 W's and the H. How is the data created? Why, when, where, what, who, all of these different things. Um, this is really important. You may not see it at the time. You're working on an active project. You're right in the middle of it. You know what you're doing. You know what the data is. The problem is that if you share the data with somebody else, or you go back to the project a few months later, you may not remember all of those details. Sharing the data, the more better organized your data is, the easier it is for other people to access the data that you're using. So especially if you have a shared network server drive, you really don't want to get sloppy with where you're putting the data. If you use models and things like that, it's really good to document those so that someone could recreate your model. What do you do if the model, for some reason, mysteriously crashes and no longer works? If you didn't document it, you're going to have a hard time rebuilding it. Now, what are some of the strategies for organization? Well, number one, keep it simple. If you don't keep it simple and you have some really complex plan, it's just not going to be workable. People just aren't going to do it. So the simpler the plan is, the easier it is to keep that plan going, and people may actually do it. ArcView does have some really great tools to help keep us organized. I threw a quote in here from Jack Dangermond. He feels that metadata is very important, and he's trying to give you the tools that you can use to easily maintain metadata. Coordinate your plan with your department. So if you're part of an enterprise GIS and you have a GIS program manager or a coordinator or a director, you don't want to go off on your own and develop your own little plan. You want to make sure that what you do is coordinated with the rest of your team. That way, when you share data amongst each other, you'll be familiar with the data structure and the organization structure, and you will all work more effectively as a team. Little pet peeve here, if you have never figured this out before, sometimes if you put spaces in your file names or in your folder names, there are some tools that you can run in the ArcGIS software where if there is a space in the file name or the folder name, the tool will not function. Now, it won't tell you why it's not functioning. It just simply will not work. So it's a good habit to just avoid spaces at all times. I like to organize my data by source. So I might have a roads folder and I might have county roads and federal roads, state roads, but I know if I'm looking for a road, it's going to be in that roads folder. Same thing goes with aerial imagery. I have aerial imagery coming out the wazoo here at the college, and we try to keep that organized in a single folder. We organize it by region, and then we organize it by what year the imagery is in. So some kind of simple organizational scheme here will really make it easier to find that data when you want to look for it. Ultimately, it's up to you and your organization to find a system that works, but it pays big dividends for the little amount of time that you have to put in front to organize. Now, I'm going to throw this in here. Don't forget to back up your data, okay? So you really just don't appreciate this until you accidentally delete a week's worth of work and you made it yourself and you have to spend time fixing it. Now, one of my sort of laws is if it took you 5 work days to create a new GIS file and you accidentally delete it and you didn't back it up, you can recreate the same file in only 3.5 days, okay? It's like a deja vu GIS data creation. Trust me, I've done it. So I'm positive that this rule is correct. The other thing is when you're working with ArcMap and ArcCatalog even, the Esri software, every once in a while, it just refuses to work, okay? And your computer will lock up, it will crash, and if you worked all day on a project and you never saved it, you might lose an entire day's worth of work just from that alone. So back up your data and save frequently. Well, that's the end of my lecture here. I am going to do a demo on ArcCatalog as a separate lecture. I hope you have a great day.